Um, all right, so let's get it started. So, why don't you talk a little bit about Luce, how you learned about it, how you became interested in it, and then your experience.
Sure. Um, when I was at Spelman, I didn't necessarily think of myself as, you know, um, an incredible scholar, but
Okay.
I always loved learning. Like,
Mm.
I love that Spelman gave us so many opportunities outside of the classroom to learn.
Okay.
So, they have visiting professors come and lecture, and different artists come to the Spelman Art Museum. And one of those opportunities came when Dr. Gans hosted a session about postgraduate fellowships. And up until that point, all I knew about the Rhodes was that one of the characters on Scandal had done the
Mhm.
Rhodes. It's like, that's what future presidents do. And, I didn't think I would ever get that, but I said, this is another opportunity to learn about what options are next. So I went to the talk Dr. Gans hosted. And basically what she told us was that all of us are competitive applicants, no
Mhm.
matter what we previously heard. And if we work hard, we could easily get any of these fellowships, Boren, Rhodes, and Luce. And Rhodes it didn't seem to fit with the path that I was on. And I don't want to work for the State Department. So Boren was out. But in the packet she had for us for sample essays, I remember one of the girls who did the Luce was so interested in media studies. And she told this beautiful story, and I can't remember the specifics of it, but I remember her essay just being so much more of a story about who she was as a person,
Mhm.
as opposed to expanding on her CV or resume.
Mm.
And that, along with the opportunity to go to Asia fully funded for a year, really struck me. I think it
Mhm.
was her story and how much I could see that she was maybe an individual who excelled at the creative arts and like interpersonal relationshiping as opposed to academia and things like that.
Okay.
So I think that was my sophomore year. So I had a little bit time to wait. And I think between my sophomore year and my senior year, there's another girl who was a semifinalist and didn't get it.
Mhm.
Um, and then it came to senior year, and I knew I wanted to do something, off the beaten path besides grad school and go straight to work. And I think I was looking through some old papers and I found that packet Dr. Gans had originally given us. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, my grades are actually really good. I have strong professional standing in my community. And I just really remember Dr. Gans emphasizing that I would be a competitive candidate no matter what was, when you think of
Mhm.
competitive candidates, it's like the kids who went to Harvard and she's like, no, Spelmanites are competitive candidates. Um, and so I applied, and I think one thing that really helped my application is I'm a decent writer. I don't necessarily think I'm like the best writer, but I can tell a story pretty well.
Mhm.
And that's something that I think the selectors are looking for. They would like to know the person, and that's why
Yeah.
they give such a long essay as compared to Fulbright or some of these other postgraduate fellowships that ask for 200 to 500 word short answers. They
Mhm.
really want like a full personal statement to get to know who you are. Um, and so for me, it was really important to tell a story that I knew wouldn't be told, which is very cliched to say as it pertains to postgraduate fellowships, but that's really what was in my head and what
Mhm.
guided me through talking about soil. So my
Mhm.
all of my applications have been about food sovereignty because that's what I want to do professionally. But that first application was really me telling a story, and the thread that connected, telling a story of me around the world. But the thread that connected me through these places around the world was the relationships the people I was meeting had with their soil.
Mhm.
I was able to talk about the experience I had studying abroad in Cuba and some time I had studying abroad in the Bahamas. And then with this last time applying, I talked about time I had studying, doing a work share in Puerto Rico. And that it was really important for me to show how soil helped me connect my life in Atlanta to the lives of people in both the Bahamas and Cuba.
Mhm.
Um, as it pertains to like why I chose it the first time, I think that Asia is becoming burgeoning among Black scholars. I think we spend a lot of time in Latin America
Mm-hmm.
because of that diasporic connection.
Mm-hmm.
But I before applying to the Luce, I'd only known like 2 Black people had spent time in Asia. And
Okay.
so for me, that was new and exciting. And now living here, I see how important it is for Black people to not only have their own connection with Asia, but also understand um, the historic legacy of African and Asian diasporas working together towards
Mm-hmm.
innovation and towards liberation.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so you've asked so many good questions, and now I'm like lost in my thoughts because I really want to. Those questions, they're so intriguing to me. And now I'm realizing that I've lost the original
No,
thought.
no. So now, like, so the first time around, and this is it's no small feat to be named a semifinalist. So you're named a
Yeah.
semifinalist, you interview, and they say, great, but you weren't selected to be a finalist. Why do you apply again?
So again, um, Ling Lee, who was the former program director,
Mm-hmm.
and the former president, Michael, and I can't remember his last name. I feel so bad. Essentially, both at different times during the application process, like even before the results came out, like even before they started the selection process, they were like, "We want you.
Mm-hmm.
We can't guarantee it's going to be you, but if it's not, apply again."
Okay.
And I think I just needed that reassurance that like I was a competitive candidate, because there's
Mm-hmm.
so many moments where like the profile of the competitive candidate graduated summa cum laude,
Mm-hmm.
super honor society, and that's not shade against them, but
Mm-hmm.
there's different ways to be a competitive candidate, and
Yeah.
I showed up in those ways.
Yeah, I mean, because one of our semifinalists, I mean, I don't even think she had a 3.0
Oh
because there
wow.
is no grade point average requirement. And so what was interesting was that like we had two, my first year out, we had two semifinalists and one like, I mean, she had like a 3.9, maybe a
Mm,
4.0.
mhm,
The other one would like literally she might have had like a 2.7.
mhm.
But like Luce and Fulbright, they don't have a GPA requirement. And so
No.
Spelman doesn't impose one.
Yeah.
But the thing that when I was sort of introduced to this fellowship world that they told us is that in general, all of these international fellowships, one of the things that they're looking for is grit. Like they're interested in narratives of persistence.
Yeah.
So I think a part of like the fact that you do apply again is in and of itself a story of persistence.
Hmm.
But also the girl with the 2.7, what was interesting was that she had a lot of D's. And so the question became like, why do you stay in this major? And she had this really compelling story about why she stayed in the major,
Hmm.
but it was a story of persistence. It was like in her DNA.
Hmm.
And so that's a part of what I think they're interested in. So I guess a part of what I would like to know is how that narrative of persistence helped you on the ground once you
Yeah.
are named a finalist. How does persistence matter in your life as a fellowship recipient?
Yeah. So the first thing I will say is I am not the only person in my cohort who applied twice. There's a
Okay.
white boy, Evan. He applied 2 times before he got
Okay.
it. And then another white young man who went to Emory who applied one more time before he got it. So
Okay.
it's actually quite common with the Luce. And
Yeah.
you're right, it does demonstrate persistence for
Mm-hmm.
people to just come back and with another, compared against another set of candidates, it's them.
Yeah.
On the question of persistence, being away from home for a year, and as you get older, like for me, now that I've done this year, a year is no time at all. Like I'm like, if I could do this year, I could do anything for a year. But it will challenge you in such specific, minute ways
Mm-hmm.
that there's no way you could ever anticipate it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we
Mm-hmm.
are all such different people who have such different needs socially, physically, and all the there's just no advice someone could give you for that one
Mm-hmm.
moment randomly in your placement that something happens and it hits you right in your heart.
Yeah.
And so you really have to have either developed or be prepared to develop on the spot that mechanism within yourself that pulls you back to the moment when you wanted this more than anything on earth.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to be able to like sit down and say, you know, it does suck right now, and I can't acknowledge that this is not the most ideal situation. But 6 months ago, I was on my knees every night praying to be here. Now
Yeah.
I'm here. Um, and I think a lot of people frame persistence as finding the good moment and everything. But for me, persistence this last year was being able to say, like, actually, this moment does not feel good, and I'm going to stick it through anyway.
Yeah.
Like right now, I can't pinpoint something about this moment that's perfect, and I still am going to stay.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think for me, that is such a huge life skill. And you can get it in a number of ways, but I think getting it through solo traveling, being in another environment completely just builds, like you said, that word grit in a
Mm-hmm.
way, it builds it so much quicker. And I think it builds it in a way that's so much more sustainable. Like it's just
Yeah.
in you at that point. It's a part of who you are.
So, like, okay, so can you like tell me what it's like once you get accepted?
Mhm,
What was the process of sort of being a part of this loose cohort?
mhm,
And are you a cohort where you literally can rely on each other? Did it feel like
mhm.
community? What's the transition like away from Spelman's community into this?
I think that's another really good question as it relates to like what the experience will be like.
Mm-hmm.
I do need to preface my answer with saying that my cohort year is the most unique cohort year they've ever had. And the two before it were also incredibly unique.
Mm-hmm.
But mine was unique in that, A, we were the off the record, but not off the record because other Spelmanites need to know this. Our cohort followed the George Floyd uprising.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
And so they were so proud and never failed to mention that we were the most diverse cohort they'd ever had.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing that makes our cohort unique is that we did not spend as much time together, you know, because all of the cohorts supposed to meet in New York
Mm-hmm.
for a week of community building, team building, leadership development before they head off to Asia. We did
Okay.
not have that time.
Because of
And
COVID?
because of COVID.
Okay.
We also did every interview over Zoom, which
Mm,
typically never happens. Uh, an additional element of what makes our cohort unique is that you are supposed to be maybe one of two, at most three other fellows in your country. And
mm-hmm.
it's very rare for you and that fellow to be in the same city, let alone province.
Right.
Because of lockdown and quarantine requirements, there were sometimes 10 fellows in one area together. Sometimes we were in the same
Oh,
hotel. Yeah.
really? Okay.
So one of the conversations I had with Mariko Silver was because there was a lot of, oh, Dr. Lewis.
She's coming.
Um, One of the things I was speaking out with Mariko Silver was like the tension between the Luce is not supposed to be a cohort fellowship. You're
Right.
supposed to be in this country by yourself, and you know, learn what it means to build community. Our year was uniquely a cohort year because of COVID, and I
Okay.
don't think Luce was prepared. And this is by no fault of their own. It's because of COVID. I don't think they were prepared to curate a cohort. So
Thank you for that because
yeah,
like that distinction is nice because right, like they talk about the class. And I did think, like you said, okay, like you meet for, that time in New York. But I always thought, like, how does that work out? Like, do you have monthly check-ins? But you were saying like it was never designed for that.
no. In the
Okay.
original design, you meet before you leave.
Mm-hmm.
Then halfway through your year, you all have a meeting. Like I think last year they did it in the child, they have so much money. They got a
Really?
private island in the Manilas. The Luce scholars are the only people on that. When I tell you, that's another thing that
Wow.
Spellman and I look out for with these cohorts. You will be exposed, and I will continue talking about the cohort experience, but I
Okay.
think it's really important for people to know, like, I grew up class privileged. Like I'm from Columbia, Maryland. Education, the education budget comes from people's property taxes. People move to Columbia because they don't want to live in DC, right? Like my
Yeah.
parents commute to DC every day. I saw more wealth than I had ever seen in my entire life. Hi,
Mhm.
Dr. Lewis. And I think it's good for Spelmanites to know that that exists, to know
Yeah.
how much money is in the world. Um, for me, I don't aspire to have that much wealth, but it's good to know that like the people you're in the room with
Mhm.
have no orientation possibly to where you come from,
Yeah.
and will say crazy things around because that level of wealth. One of the trustees is Henry W. Luce's great 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 granddaughter or something.
Wow. Wow.
Like direct, like the what are those families? The Carnegies and the
Yeah.
Mellon. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The what is the other, the F family, the Ford, those are
Yeah.
her, those are her peers.
Right.
Uh, but that's an aside. But toward the cohort
Mm,
experience, you meet three
mhm.
times. So you do, you're friendly, you're professional, and you do build lifelong relationships. I think with my cohort particularly, and because there were so many queer, Black, and brown kids, we had that like, no, like we are family here because we're the only people who know what we're going through together.
Okay.
So it's more of like a quasi cohort experience. At, and all of what I'm saying right now could possibly not be relevant for the next year because they're
Mhm.
transitioning so much. Yeah.
Got it. And so when like when you were tested in terms of your persistence, you were surprised, you think? I mean, like like at what you were able to display, or did you think that you had cultivated the resources, internal resources for the persistence, or did it happen on the ground? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I think, and I said this all the time during my Luce year. The only reason I was able to do Luce is because I graduated Spelman.
Okay.
And like Spelmanites have that joke, like Spelman produces diamonds through
Mm-hmm.
pressure.
Mm.
And so like, you know, one, there was this instance where I was interviewing and it was this white man, Ted, can't remember his last name, Ted Alcorn, teaches at Columbia right now.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, you have so much involvement in your community, but how do you feel you'll do in a region that's a lot more diverse? And I said, we're allowed to call them by their first names because they're white and they want to be cool. I was like, Ted, I don't know what about Spelman makes you think it's not diverse, because we
Right.
have Black folks from the Caribbean, all over the United States,
That's
from
it.
West Africa. We have exchange students from Korea and Japan. Like, what about that says not diverse at Spelman?
Yeah,
Um, because Spelman is diverse.
it
It is a
is.
microcosm of a world. And like when you're on that campus, you feel all the tensions and contradictions of all the ways that Blackness can be diverse. And they
Mm-hmm.
really try to flatten us like that. And
Yep.
don't try me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I think part of it really was like Spelman professor, faculty, and staff, your Spelman sisters, build that persistence in you. And
Okay.
then Luce is where you get to test it out.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And so one of the things that you said to us in the email is that that the leadership skills that you cultivated and that come out of HBCUs matters for fellowship experiences like Luce. And often it's a very important part of the application. And we try to help students understand that being a leader is more than just a title.
Mhm.
It's actually like these outcomes that you produce. But one of the things that the late great Jane Smith said to me is that she wishes that Spelman students would understand that the next step in leadership at Spelman is really understanding to extend ADW. Now, I thought what
Mhm.
she meant by that is that these folk really are looking for a particular kind of insight that you have about what you want to see in the world that comes from this kind of ethical posture and envisioning that happens in the diaspora. But I'd like for you to tell us specifically what you have learned about leadership, what you think you gained from an HBCU, what you want us to continue to build on, that like that sort of umbrella of questions about leadership.
Yes. First, rest in power, Dr. Jane Smith.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, this question is uh, maybe more difficult for me to answer because I feel like particularly for this question, I have an experience that might not extend to
Hmm.
all of Spelman students' body, and that I'm a community organizer.
Okay.
And that's my orientation to the world. But I am a community organizer because I went to Spelman, and
Hmm.
Spelman produces community organizers,
Hmm.
sometimes on purpose and a lot of the times on accident. And
Hmm.
so I was like learning under these incredible professors, Dr. Beverly Guy Shefdal, Dr. Bahati Kaumba, um, and like immediately able to apply the theories we were using in class in Atlanta. I
Hmm.
was heavily involved in the Atlanta housing justice community. I was heavily involved in the Atlanta reproductive justice community, and so that showed up a lot in my application,
Okay.
that my orientation to the world was understanding interpersonal relationships and community empowerment and
Hmm.
community development and grassroots level organizing. And for the Luce, so much of what they're looking for is candidates who will immerse themselves in communities.
Mm.
Um,
Okay.
and so I would say that if you have students that, there are a few different tracks of Spelmanites, there's like future HBCU president, you got your little Angela Davis types, so many. But
Hmm.
if you have some that you see on, the community, I think this is a good fellowship for them because the
Okay.
emphasis is on, are you able to build community across difference?
Okay. Okay. Because I was thinking too about, like as professors, often we're interested in cultivating students and like introducing them to what's possible, even when they're on like a particular track, so like,
Mm-hmm.
it really is, it's just a part of the work where you're like, no, my job really is to just expand your horizons about what is possible. What might you say we can do, right? Like, that would help sort of give students what you might have been naturally or inclined towards.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, is it a class that you think they ought to have or to take, or what might reinforce those sort of leadership insights and community connections?
I think first of all, Spelman is already doing a lot of those things, which is
Okay.
excellent. They're already doing a lot of those things because like the faculty and leadership at Spelman is incredible, but also because students have over decades, right?
Hmm.
Like push Spelman to do those things.
Yeah.
Um, so like programs like the social justice scholars are
Hmm.
incredible. Well is incredible. ADW isn't a program, but I think so much more resources need to be pushed towards ADW. Like
Hmm.
we were reading Foucault as first years. There's so many students who don't get to that until they're juniors.
Yeah.
Um, those are things that are happening that need to continue happening.
Hmm.
When I was on campus, I was really, really pushing for Spelman and the local community to institutionalize deeper relationship, right?
Okay.
Because what a lot of people who aren't familiar with the HBCU world don't know is well, at least the way it looked when I lived there, but the way the West End and Westview and Ashby City look is the way a lot of the neighborhoods these girls are coming from. And then they come to Spelman and first week orientation, they hear, don't step off campus unless you're in groups or twos and threes because you're going to get robbed and mugged, which is like, yes, keep your senses about you. You're young women in a city you don't recognize, but these neighborhoods look just like your home. And so you
Hmm.
should have as much investment in them and the city of
Hmm.
Atlanta and Black Atlanta while
Hmm.
you're here as if you were, while you,
Hmm.
for the time that you're here. Because Spelman invests so much in us, but Spelman's only able to do so much because Spelman has had that informal relationship with Atlanta for so long. Like
Hmm.
so many of these students are like, they're from Atlanta, or I guess this age group is phasing out, but when they were little, they went to the summer camp that Spelman used to have and things
Yeah.
like that. And so I think if the school could continue to find, I don't know, are they doing the farmer market still?
Well, I mean, because of COVID, things have
COVID.
got to come back.
Yeah.
But the food studies program has developed the minor,
Hmm.
and the garden now has a full-time person to tend it.
Soraya,
And
right?
I don't know the person's name. Miss Cook was talking about whoever it is recently. I haven't met her because again, like, COVID. So like you aren't around. I think next year will probably look a little bit more normal, but
Mm,
last year was just like it was just strange.
mm,
Um, but I mean, there's a vision for
mm,
for that food studies minor that I think can do so many of the things that I know that you did just from reading your statement when you were Miss Spellman and your platform and your interest in making those, solidifying those ties. I think the college is continuing to move in that kind of direction. I had a lot of students in the honors program who took a food studies course and they did a capstone about food.
mm,
And so those were really encouraging, good projects. The other thing that I sort of was interested in, and I mentioned to you that I was interested in knowing is like what insight might you give to us about
mm.
how we can help first generation college students who don't even know what a fellowship is until we tell them the first time, how they might imagine the benefit of a fellowship in their life. Like, why do it? What's the value in it?
I think like the quick and dirty answer is like whatever you picture yourself doing in the future, there are doors you have to pass through, right? And because you
Hmm.
are Black and because you're a woman and whatever identities post those two forefront that people can see about you, there's extra locks on those doors. With
Mm.
a fellowship like Luce on my CV now, the doors just
Hmm.
open now. Like people don't even need
Hmm.
to know anything. Oh, you did the Luce? Oh, come talk to us,
Mm.
you know? And I didn't
Yeah.
even realize that until after I was already on the Luce and talking to these people who, like I said before, who have wealth I haven't imagined. And they're just ready to abundantly give it to you. But
Hmm.
you have to unlock one of those doors first. And then
Hmm.
you get another one, and then you get another one. And soon like it's like a verification
Yeah.
from people in that world that you can play our game. So
Yeah.
we will invite you in, which is, it doesn't sound nice to say, but we or you are teaching at and mentoring and tutoring young ladies at a predominantly Black college, and we know what it is. Twice as hard for half as much. But
Hmm.
this is one avenue to maybe not have to do twice as hard all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, someone did tell me when I was in graduate school, one of my professors, that once you get one like fellowship or money, it's easier to get the next one, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Because you have the success of doing the thing, but also to be aware of the fact that it's an opportunity to build a network.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's true because the people in your cohort go on to be captains of industry and
Yeah.
college presidents and sit
Yeah.
on boards, and so it does become an amazing opportunity in that regard. And in your
Apart from that,
case,
though,
hmm
oh, just quickly, because I don't want it to
hmm
just be like, this is how you advance your career.
sure.
I just like, the world is very, very, very big. And living in
Hmm.
America, it's so easy to get caught up in America. And so,
Yeah.
particularly with the Luce, and especially because Spelman has the goal of 100% of the student body having some sort of study abroad experience, they need to capitalize on every opportunity they can to see the world. Like they might
Yeah.
not know what's behind the curtain, and that's okay.
Hmm.
But once you push the curtain aside and you realize how big the world is, you're never going to want to stop exploring. But you'll come
Yeah, that's
home,
true.
and it travel is becoming more and more expensive. And when you're an undergraduate, is the best. You're young, you have very little obligations. People are throwing money at you to travel. Like take advantage. If
Yeah.
that's something I could, I don't know how to make it sound more lucrative to someone who hasn't traveled before, but it's really, it will change your life for the better in so many ways.
Well, and in your case, I haven't seen this happen. I mean, generally, like our Marshall, I mean, she just got into Wash U. I mean, she got into everywhere she applied, but she's going to be going to Wash U. So oftentimes they go from, yeah, well, I mean, like fellowship, Fulbright into some nonprofit or law
Yeah.
school. I mean, you went from Luce to Princeton in Asia, and I mean,
Yeah.
and you're continuing to be interested in maybe another fellowship.
Yeah.
Why? Why do another one?
Okay, maybe you don't want to tell your students this, but I don't want to work. I worked after undergrad because I didn't get my fellowship. And
Hmm.
it was an amazing experience. I learned how to do my taxes kind of and ADT and the chain of command. And I don't want to do it anymore.
Mm,
Like a
mm,
fellowship is literally like, oh, we see what a leader you are and we see you have these special skills. We're going to resource you to do what you're interested in. It's like
yeah,
getting the best research grant you possibly could. And so, I mean, there is a time when you age out of them, but I haven't aged out
you
of them.
haven't. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, and do you think that like the future for you, at least this next year, is in Asia? Do you imagine like the next 5 years are in Asia?
um, because my interest is in food justice and climate change, uh, I anticipate my professional career spending a lot of time in Asia. A lot
Okay.
of people don't know this, but the top 50 cities in the world
Mm-hmm.
susceptible to traumatic climate shocks are all in Asia.
Okay.
All, yeah.
Okay.
And so there's a lot that can be pulled from here, a lot of research and a lot of strategies that can be pulled from here and replicated in other places around the world in terms of, like climate refugees, indigenous land management, water diplomacy, and things like that.
Okay. Well, the thing that people will ask us is, well, what about your language? I mean, so what do you speak?
ฉันพูดภาษาไทยนิดหน่อยค่ะ um, that's the great thing about these people with all this money. I got Thai lessons at CIASI, which is
Mm-hmm.
the at Wisconsin Madison, which is the top East and Southeast Asian language program in the country before I left. And then while I was here, they paid for me to do Thai lessons. And because language is so integral to community building, I basically, when my classes were done, I emailed them and said, hey, I can't afford to pay for more language classes, but I really love it. And my Thai teachers are part of my community. Can I continue until the end of my Luce year? And they just paid for it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And Princeton
so,
and Asia is paying for me to continue Thai lessons.
so what's the relationship between you learning the language and you getting the loose? So was that all up like so you were
Oh,
learning while you were
I
loose?
didn't know a lick of Thai before I got the Luce. And they anticipate that I don't know what the new rules will be, but they
Mm-hmm.
anticipate that you've had very little to none experience in
Okay.
Asia with Asian studies with Asian languages.
Okay. Okay.
So
Yeah.
they don't need to know because a lot of girls at Spelman take Spanish, Portuguese, and French, and
Mm-hmm.
I had done Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't even know that Thailand was my choice. So I could have
Yeah.
been studying Vietnamese, Urdu, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what like the boring. I mean, people do that for language that isn't taught at your institution. And generally like those kids, like IS is one of my favorite majors. I learned more about it once I came over to honors. And what happens is you're introduced to these students who they generally have just a very robust understanding of what they want their future to be and how they think about education with respect to that in a way that a lot of students don't, right? Like, so it'll be, I want to go to medical school, but I think that having a study abroad experience is an important part of what it means to be an educated person. And I
Mhm,
couldn't study abroad for as long if I would have majored in chemistry. So
mhm,
I generally know these kids because they're applying for Fulbright, and that's how they imagine they're going to study for the MCAT while they
mhm.
do Fulbright. So it's just really interesting how people configure, their futures, and generally they're international studies students.
I started as an international studies student. Even though I didn't continue, I appreciate it for the fact that they are committed to seeing their students go abroad. But I
Mm-hmm.
also feel that way about the Spelman Spanish department.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wish I had, hindsight is 2020, but
Yeah.
I wish I had known that if I had studied, if I kept with Spanish, I could have been in the DR or
Yeah.
Mexico. The time I spent in Cuba was amazing, but I wish I had more.
Yeah, that's another one of my favorite departments, world languages, because like they have a way of working with students around anything you're interested in. And so like a part of what you have to do, and this is true about students coming from high school in general, is that you've got to get them out of that high school mindset, right? Like, because history is a robust major, but they're thinking high school history, or they're thinking high school language.
Mm-hmm.
But world languages is really dope in terms of like we'll work with you to make the future for yourself. Whereas a student will say to me, because some of these kids I work with, they come in and they've already tested out. So I feel like my job is to get them to keep going, but
Mm-hmm.
they'll say things like, "Oh, I'm tired of the language and I want to go to law school." And I'm like, "Yeah, but can you imagine if you could, like do something about your interest in immigration and you wrote your application in Spanish?"
Mm-hmm.
Like, or you could do diplomacy work, you could work for the UN. There are all kinds of things you could do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think world languages is helpful, you know, in that
Yeah.
regard. Yeah.
I think something else that's difficult about it is, we're on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these lessons you can only
Yeah.
learn in the experience.
Yeah.
And now being on the other side, I feel that I probably feel similar to you in that we need to find a way to convey to them like this could be the key to everything you've ever dreamed about. But
Yeah.
if you've never seen it or experienced, I don't know how to I don't know how to convey to you what you're missing, except that
Yeah.
you just trust me that this could be really cool and generative and transformative for you. But
Yeah.
like if Spelman is the farthest you've gone outside your hometown, I don't know how to tell you, like, the undergraduates at Chiang Mai University are writing their essays in 3 different languages.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And so, I mean, just one more thing from me before I ask Dr. Lewis if she wanted to add anything or ask anything is can you give us like a sense of your cohort? Like what kinds of things are they working on? I know you're interested in food sovereignty, food justice. What are they interested in?
This is so cool because they truly are invested in seeing an expansive array of disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
So there were 3 people interested in medicine. My friend Nihal was interested in public health outcomes of young people in Japan based on whether or not they got free school meals.
Mm.
My friend Fiona is going to medical school at Harvard next year. She deferred for the Luce, but she was interested in different grassroots and community-based approaches to COVID
Mm.
um, supports in Sri Lanka. And then Jackson is nearly a doctor. He just has to take his last boards. He was training medical professionals in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, how to read lung x-rays.
Wow.
So that's just the 3 who are into public health. Meg and Will Wheeler are both artists. Oh, Spelman students in the curatorial studies program would excel at the Luce.
Mm.
So Meg worked with artists at Ho Chi Minh City University to
Mm-hmm.
help expand their curation. Curatorial studies isn't my thing. The
Mm-hmm.
art she was looking at was very cool.
Mm.
Um, and then Will was kind of like a wacky dude. He just loved art,
Mm.
especially art you could touch and play with. So he was
Mm.
supposed to be in China. He didn't end
Mm-hmm.
up going to China. He did get to go to Saudi Arabia because of his placement.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Jordan, another queer Black young man, was interested in transportation. So with his placement, he actually wrote a white paper,
Mm-hmm.
like he published now, about how expanding bike access would diminish traffic congestion for Singapore. oh God, there's so many kids. Everybody was interested in different things.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I mean, that really helps me. Other than I do sort of like I'm interested in like if they place you with the like the agency or the community that you work with, what did you do? What exactly did it look like? What did your day look like?
Yeah, so placements this year because of COVID were also pretty interesting.
Okay.
And because I'm interested, I'm interested in food justice outside of just food access. My
Mm-hmm.
actual career interest is the intersection between colonialism and food justice.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about the ways that like colonialism removed people from their indigenous foodways,
Mm-hmm.
which has now all these centuries later completely interrupted people's relationship to the land, which is why we can't find any meaningful solutions to climate change. So those two factors combined means that they just placed me at the university, which is
Okay.
fine.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
especially at the postgraduate level, these professors are doing their research on their own, producing brilliant scholarship, and then also, managing their own cohorts of
Mm-hmm.
people pursuing their own PhDs. So I actually spent very little time at the university,
Okay.
but because the stipend is so nice, I essentially did field research by going out to different farms and just asking Thai farmers what they perceived climate change to be, if they were building any resiliency strategies, and then building like community and networks. And so
Okay.
you don't have to do a final project, but my final project was hosting a symposium between farmers in Atlanta, Thailand, and India to talk about climate crisis strategies.
Okay. And interesting. There's an article in the Times today about the Caribbean um and the IMF and
Mm-hmm.
sort of like the way that, debt is impacted by climate change. And like, there not being sort of like a mechanism for dealing with climate change effectively in some of these in some countries. So yeah, there's an article about that in the Times today. That's interesting because I imagine that you were working with indigenous farmers, and so I actually thought that you were like spending time on a farm every day. That's sort of what I imagine.
Yeah. So it for at least for me, and there are a couple
Hmm.
other people whose university placements didn't quite work out. That's something I'm
Hmm.
going to recommend to them. Like, you can't expect a university just to take on another advisee who's not even enrolled in the university. At least for me, it was really great to, and I didn't just do farms. Like any food justice project in this province that could be associated with climate change resiliency, I was there. So I hung out a lot of times with a local anarchist collective called Food Not Bombs, who
Hmm.
basically barters with the farmers in the market to get
Hmm.
a cheaper price for bulk food. And they
Hmm.
cook that food every Sunday and they give it to homeless people.
Hmm.
Um, and I hung out with this one restaurant owner who was working with fishing farmers in the South
Hmm.
to help them collectively bargain for better prices and to sell directly to restaurants in Bangkok and Chiang Mai. So it was really cool. It was a cool time.
Yeah. So Dr. Lewis says, how were you accepted by the farmers in Taiwan?
I was in Thailand. I think because Thailand has a unique history as it pertains to colonialism, they're very used to Westerners.
Uh,
Like, and a lot of places you go, they're used to Westerners. And so they're also, I wouldn't say they're as used to Black people, but I never really had any outright experiences of racism that maybe other people in other countries or in other cohorts would talk about. I also took Thai study really seriously. So a lot of times they were just delighted, like,
mm,
there's this little Black girl who's speaking to us about farming in Thai. And
mm,
also, I would come to them and introduce myself as a farmer and ask
mm,
uh, field specific questions. So I think for the most part, they were super kind and receptive.
mm,
But farmers are kind people.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, very nice. Is that it for you, Dr. Lewis?
That was just my immediate question when she was talking. But first of all, I apologize. I'm late. I totally slipped into mom mode.
No.
Um, Um, I had it in my
No,
mind, but then once you
Yeah.
slip into mom mode,
Yeah.
get 1,000 other things on your mind. But I'm so impressed just listening to you and talking about your experience with not just Luce, but just
Mhm.
your overall experiences. And even when you were talking about the philanthropists and
Mhm.
just that access to money piece. And then actually something you said, which I wrote about in my first book, you were talking about how when first year students come and how the neighborhood is kind of perceived by public safety and that whole concept. And I really never thought about it from the lens of you saying that some students, like their community was like that, it's like
Yeah.
a knock on their community. Whereas when I wrote about it, I was writing about it from the lens of me being from a very, very, you can't even call it predominantly, it was this very white, lily, sheltered community, and coming and being just like so afraid because they were like, you can't walk on that side of the street. You
Mm.
can't walk over there at that time because what is all greenery now for us, and now there's those apartments um, by Morehouse School. The Madison, that was the housing projects. It was Harris Homes housing projects when I was at Spelman. And so like there was this big thing where you can't go over there. And so
Mm.
over there was like this thing, this
Mm.
phenomena. But when I started working, I worked over there.
Mm.
And so I wrote about and that's what my chapter was called, Over There. I worked
Mm.
over there on just that whole concept of this like erection of this boundary,
Mhm.
the us and them classism. And so I never thought about it from the side you were talking about though. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what I was deliberating on when you were talking about that. But just excellent. I think this is really helpful information. And Dr. Height, as you were talking about the different majors you feel like would benefit or be a good fit for Luce, I also thought about ed studies
Mhm.
because
yes.
education studies is so interdisciplinary, and a lot of those, like there's not one ed study student that is the same. They all have different passions and interests, gifts. And so I think ed studies might also be a hidden gem for something like Luce as well.
Yep. I think so too. I think
Yeah.
so too.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, because like I think the thing that we might be challenged with is the point that Eva was making about the diaspora and like making the connection to students that this is a part of your diaspora, right? And so because like I mean generally there are students who like they're in the European, I want the Marshall, I'm applying for the UK fellowship, right? So Marshall Rhodes. And then you've got those diplomacy kids who are Wrangell, Pickering, Payne. And then, Fulbright can be a mixed bag of students. But like Luce, like it's generally the whole passion for Asia thing. And those students have generally come out of a certain pocket. But I like this idea that, yeah, like this is just a wonderful opportunity to sort of, to see the world, to explore these connections, to test yourself. And I think like the thing that perhaps we need to do is make that closer tie to what it really means to be of the diaspora,
Yeah.
to help like to cultivate more of that interest. And I like because like what you were saying, like, okay, when I was a sophomore, and like in my head, like I'm starting when I'm looking at applications when they're in high school,
Hmm. Hmm.
trying to find students to cultivate, who might be interested in opening themselves up to this kind of opportunity, you
What
know.
I would say is Luce says that they're looking for people who have, I think they say two contradictory things, right?
Mm-hmm.
They say they're looking for people who have a passion for Asia. And then
Mm-hmm.
they also at the same time are saying We're accepting people who have no relationship with Asia to hopefully ingrain in future leaders an appreciation for Asia. And I
Yeah.
think in the intersection of that our students can sit in is all they need to do to demonstrate to Luce is, and they literally ask this, why a year in Asia will
Mm-hmm.
help propel them as future leaders.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whether they're into studying pedagogy for disabled working class students, or they're
Mm-hmm.
into expanding access to the arts, if they can make a case for whatever small amount of research they've done of like something that's happening in Asia or something that's burgeoning in Asia that closely aligns with their interests,
Mm-hmm.
then they, you know, they've got it.
Yeah.
Um, because, you know, like it wasn't until I got here that I recognized the necessity for Black diasporic people and Asian diasporic people to cultivate deeper relationships.
Yeah.
I don't think there was a lot of opportunities for me to learn that. You know, like I didn't read Murakami at
Yeah.
Spelman.
Yeah.
And I didn't learn about Grace Lee Boggs and James Lee Boggs via Spelman. I learned that through movement work, you know, and
Yeah.
it's no fault of Spelman's. It's just like, to Westerners, Asia is a different universe. But
Yeah.
it really is not. And it's so much of my work here outside of the farming has been tracing that lineage of like Black people resisting the Vietnamese War.
Yeah.
Dr. King's speech about why he would not support the Vietnamese War, the
Yeah.
relationship between Malcolm X and
Yuri
Yuri.
Kochiyama. Yuri Kochiyama. I
Exactly.
mean, like, cause that for me, like, other than like I was a huge Ali fan.
Mhm.
My family's from Louisville, and just I just thought he was incredibly courageous and just humane, and human. I mean, definitely the man had faults, but it was so his stance against Vietnam War, but certainly Yuri Kochiyama, that was the first time, like for me, her relationship to Malcolm X was just so illuminating to me. But like that is generally how I sort of feel. Like as someone, as people who have been oppressed and marginalized, wherever the oppressed and marginalized are, those are my people.
Amen.
Right? Those are
Amen.
my people. And
Amen.
she is such a good like representation of that. So yeah, like I think being able to elevate those moments like in our public programming,
Mhm.
that might be a way of stimulating the interest and giving students a sense of where those connections can be. So that's something to do.
One last thing
Yeah.
I'll say, because I know it's getting really late for y'all, and I can't believe I didn't think of it before. When you talked about the HBCU leadership, I
Mm-hmm.
think HBCU students have a specific understanding of the world because we sit on those multiple axes of oppression. And
Yeah.
when we step into a space that we see as unjust, it is our nature to level it. And
Yeah.
so I think Luce will be looking for that a lot more in the future because
Mhm.
I, not to be messy and things like that, but there were a lot of issues among my cohort with,
Okay.
you know, white privileged kids coming to Asia and saying racist things about Asian people, and myself and the other
Lord.
people of color, the dark skinned Asian people in my cohort being like, if you'll say that about Asian people in Asia, what do you have
Listen.
to say about us? You know?
Yeah.
And so much of my leadership time, and I actually don't advocate for this because I should be compensated for this labor because it's somebody out there making six figures to do what I did for free. But regardless,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
much of my leadership was being like, hey, we need to hear more about Asia from Asian people, or
Yeah.
we need to talk more about what it means to be Americans with literally monopoly money running
Yeah.
around in these communities who are making less than $1 a day, much less
Yeah.
their annual salary. And so like one of the
Mm-hmm.
things I did, do either of you, are you very close with Dr. Rebecca Kumar?
Yeah.
She's in the yeah. I
Yeah.
had Kumar come and speak to my cohort along with some other
Oh,
Asian professionals about like, this is actually my home that you're in, and this is
yeah.
how you be a good guest. And so that could be
Yes.
another good avenue for Spelmanites to show to the like, I want to come to Asia to learn how to be a better ally to Asian people, point blank, period.
Yeah, yeah, nice, very nice. Yeah, yeah. And like, you're right. Like, we are positioned to have that vocabulary, that ethical
Mm-hmm,
vocabulary, and to draw on that, to tease that out, to
mm-hmm,
potentially sort of help students see how they can make those connections. I like that. That's
mm-hmm.
really nice. You know,
Yeah.
it's yeah, that's nice for lots of reasons.
It's just like
Well,
Dr. Gant told me, and I think you
hmm
all are already doing it, but I would emphasize Spelmanites just need to be reminded that they are just as competitive as a
oh
Yale,
yeah,
a Harvard, a Princeton.
yeah.
And once they settle that, please.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, because no school has a monopoly over quality of mind,
Mm-mm,
you know? So, yeah, I mean, yeah, there should be no insecurity about that.
mm-hmm,
None. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And a part of the work that we do in working with students is, right, we want this to be a really good just educational experience for you. And for I always tell them, if you win the fellowship, that's just a bonus,
mm-hmm,
but like this can be just a really important process for sort of knowing who you are. And if they just come out of it with that, like you are prepared to, be at any table with anyone,
mm-hmm.
because you're capable,
Yep.
then that's a good outcome for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, we so appreciate your time and your
Of course.
insight. As you know, we are so invested in trying to get our students more opportunities, and you have definitely helped us to that end. So thank you
Yeah.
so much.
And I'm here as a resource, like that is the mission of the Spelman alumna, to give back to
Yeah.
The Spelman game to us. So if
Okay.
students want to talk to me about what the experience was like, I
Okay.
am on Indochina time. So
Okay.
I
Yeah.
need a head, like this was fine. This was perfect. But like
Mm-hmm.
it can't, if I was in Atlanta, please drop of a hat, but I'm not in
Yeah.
Atlanta. But if
Yeah.
students
I
want
know.
to talk to you, or you need some type of written or whatever, I want to support. I want more Spelman. I want more HBCU students, period. I want
Yes.
Prairie View and
Mm-hmm.
NCCU. Like, I want all of them, but
Mm-hmm.
especially my Spelman siblings. Like, I want to be a resource. I want to help.
I heard that. I appreciate it because I do. It's hard scheduling stuff with folks in Asia because I mean the time difference is so vast. So we
Yeah.
greatly appreciate you, and I will keep that in mind as we work with students
Absolutely.
this time, this time around. So again, thank you so much.
Of
Thank
course.
you.
Y'all
All
enjoy
right.
your evening.
Okay, you
All
too.
right, you too.
Bye.